about a thing. Oh, every little thing is gonna be alright. Early in the morning, with the rising sun, three little birds perched by the window. They started to sing, yeah, a happy song, yeah. It's a message to you. I said you don't worry about a thing. No, no, no. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Yeah. I said you don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be alright. Early one morning, with the rising sun, three little birds perched by the window started to sing, oh, a happy song. This is what they say. It's
Today's topic, we're discussing HIV and AIDS. We're saying the National AIDS Council, it's just published that by 2030 its vision is to end HIV and AIDS. So today we are having David Cunningham with our guest of honor. He is the former director of AIDS, Scripture Union's HIV prevention program for Africa for 10 years, chair of PACANET, which is Pan-Africa Christian AIDS Network, up to 2006. This was Africa Director of Family Impact from 2001 up to 2009. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We also have on the panel Mr. Ted Nube, who is a lecturer at Poly and a debater by profession. Thank you so much for joining us. And also on the panel we have Nyasha Stole, who is also a debater by profession, and also is in the medical field. Thank you so much for joining us. So these are the rules of the debate. We'll give each side 5 minutes to support the motion or to go against it, and then after that we'll also give time to our expert. It doesn't necessarily debate. These ones they will debate on their own, and afterwards everyone will ask questions, add or subtract. So Nyasha Stole is saying yes, it's possible for Zimbabwe to end HIV and AIDS by year 2030 with the measures and the facilities that are in place right now. And Mr. Teddy Nube is saying no, it's not possible. Zimbabwe is not ready. It doesn't have the facilities to end HIV and AIDS by year 2030. So for now, I won't ask them anything. I'll give them time to support their side. So I'll start with you, Nyasha. Why do you say Zimbabwe is ready to end HIV and AIDS by year 2030?
Good evening, gentlemen, and Lero, thank you for the opportunity. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that the ending of HIV and AIDS by year 2030 is an adopted goal world over that Zimbabwe is part of, and we do have in support of my argument that it's possible for HIV and AIDS to be ended by year 2030. We look at various reasons, which include there's been an increased public awareness generally in Zimbabwe and world over. We've seen, like in our case in Blawayo, we've seen our billboard campaigns. If you notice that on your way to Belmont, you have billboards against Fuzu parties. Those are some of the campaigns that have been implemented just to make sure that the HIV and AIDS, its effects are mitigated. We also have several other measures, such as legalization of prostitution in Zimbabwe, in case some of you didn't know. With this has brought, I know some can look in retrospect and say that this might not have been a good idea, but you realize that this has brought increased sex education, awareness. Even people in the sex industry have been made aware, they've been enlightened, they are now more informed, they can make better decisions, which all contributes to bring AIDS by year 2030 to an end, if I may say. Another point in support of that is we've had increased support and funding from the government, from the religious sector, from the private sector as well. From the government, the support, like I said earlier on, concerning the campaigns that are being made to combat HIV and AIDS. We also have increased funding that every taxpayer in Zimbabwe is levied an AIDS levy of 3% for everyone who pays tax. This has also contributed towards funding towards fighting HIV and AIDS. Also for the religious sector, we realize that the religious sector is playing a pivotal role in fighting HIV and AIDS, with the intention to end HIV and AIDS. Well, this is subjective to beliefs, but we've noticed recently that some clerics, men of cloth prophets, to be particular, Prophet Walter Magaya came up with his own solution to end HIV and AIDS. That didn't go so well, but this shows us the efforts that the religious sector is making to fight against HIV and AIDS. Also from the private sector, we've had most organizations here in Zimbabwe that include OK, TM, participating in AIDS campaigns, commemorating the World AIDS Day, which was on 1 December. We've also had an improvement in birth and safer child delivery processes, where a parent infected by HIV and AIDS, suffering from HIV and AIDS, a mother to be exact, can give birth to a child, and the delivery processes in place to make sure that the child is not infected by HIV and AIDS. That has also helped a lot to make sure that a new life is born without HIV and AIDS, regardless of the fact that the parent would be carrying the disease. We've also had empowerment of women and gender equality through parliament, through laws that have been put in place and policies. Women now have a voice. Women are not regarded as equal to men, so to be exact, a woman can say no if the spouse has this disease. A woman can say no if the woman suspects of infidelity in the marriage. She can say no. She can say no to sex and not consent, so that she doesn't get the disease. So these are just some of the few reasons that I came up with that I believe can definitely lead to a 2030 where AIDS is ended by the year 2030.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I wouldn't say I beg to differ. Rather, I think he dwelt much on assumptions. I will go deeper into issues of risks to do with the vision, to say, in as much as we all want to have a HIV-free society by the year 2030, what are the challenges that can stop us from getting there?
Okay.
Firstly, let us talk about the campaign against HIV and AIDS vis-a-vis, for example, condoms, the use of condoms. If you look in this forum where we are in now, it is dominated by males. Why? Because people who are marketing events to do with HIV, things to do with HIV and AIDS, targets mostly men. And at the end
maybe
of the day,
because men have the highest percentage of spreading the disease, or also of being infected by the disease.
Sex is something, sexual intercourse rather, because when we talk about HIV and AIDS, it is largely transmitted through sexual intercourse, right?
Yes, yes.
And I think sexual intercourse is something that transpires between two people in whatever circumstance. And then in Zimbabwe, in our community, it is between males and females. And in most cases, if we are to be genuine about conversations about HIV and AIDS, we should include both and not give preference to males and say because males are the ones who are spreading HIV, where are they spreading it to? Where are they getting it from? There is a woman behind everything. Even if you take a look at even the marketing of condoms, the reason why male condoms are the ones which are succeeding is because focus has been directed on males, and the rest of the society is made to believe that the task of preventing the spread of HIV and AIDS largely lies on men. And that is why female condoms today are not a success. And that is why you see billboards that only market male condoms. And then let's talk about other issues. When we are talking about eradicating HIV and AIDS, we should link it with other factors that actually contribute. Yes, it's possible to have everyone aware that HIV and AIDS is something that we have to get rid of. But in many circumstances, people find themselves having to be infected with HIV and AIDS. Some of them, they don't even choose. In some cases, it's because of extreme cases of poverty. For my background, I can tell you, as a lecturer, I have seen students who end up going with older men who obviously in some instances might be spreading HIV and AIDS, but it's transactional sex to say, I want a plate of supper, therefore I will go out with an older man. And in any event, even if we argue that they can use condoms, we give them condoms to go and have that sex, as he alludes to say, because commercial sex work is now legal in Zimbabwe, therefore we give commercial sex workers condoms. We are going to stop HIV and AIDS. I can tell you for a fact that a student who is a first year, who might be dating a 50-year-old man, does not have power over or bargaining over arbitration processes during the process of using protection or not. If the guy who is pumping in finances, who has bought a lot of savannas and who has taken her out for drinking and so forth, and who is buying a supper says, let us not use protection, that is it. So you can see the link or the nexus between extreme levels of poverty and the spread of HIV and AIDS, which is something that we have to speak to if we are going to be serious about engaging issues to do with HIV and AIDS. Now, let's go to issues of facilities. When we are talking about facilities, we are not talking about hospitals and clinics, because hospitals and clinics, there are perceptions about them. We need to be innovative in how we carry across the idea of HIV testing to the people in Makokova, to the people in Makandeni, and to the people in Wombogodo there in Cholocho. Those people will not deliberately go to a hospital or a clinic to get tested. But if we are to be deliberate and go to them and ensure that they are tested, I'm glad that this other day I was listening to the news and they were saying they are unrolling a deliberate program where they are going to be testing people door by door. I think that is a positive step in the right direction. And then our another thing is poor community buy-in. We have done very little in ensuring that after someone has been tested, how does that person feel? We think that it is systematic and all that to say you cancel someone, don't commit suicide, come for medication and so forth. We don't bother to go and monitor their behavior after they have been tested, after they are taking medication. I can tell you for a fact, half of the men who discover that they have HIV and AIDS feel that they have the mandate to spread it because they feel like they are victims of the system, and they feel like the better way to make themselves feel better is by spreading it to younger women and so forth.
It's now illegal. Right?
It's now illegal, it's now illegal, but the enforcement mechanism to say how do you enforce that this was a deliberate or this was not a deliberate move to spread HIV and AIDS. So I think as a society we need to be serious on how we tackle those issues and how we engage those people after HIV testing and so forth. Yes, it's okay to test people, but monitoring what happens afterwards. And I think in Zimbabwe and in Africa in general, the number of new infections seems to be decreasing, which is a positive development that we appreciate. But we think that we have to do something, not only from the CSO level or from the NGO level, which is the case now, but at a government level or at a partnership level, which is supposed to promote the testing. And then again, let's talk about issues to do with policy coordination. If we talk about policy coordination, take a good look at the agenda to empower women. It has been integrated into each and every policy. If you go to the Ministry of Agriculture, central is the issue of empowering women and 50-50. If you go to the Ministry of Small to Medium Enterprises, that is the issue. But HIV and AIDS is the problem that affects everyone from across, and yet little emphasis is being put or little has been done to unroll it at a government level or at a policy level. Although I don't disagree, there are some efforts that have been made to unroll it at a policy level, but I think more can be done. And if more is not done, 2030 could be just a joke. And I'm saying this from that position. And then again, issues to do with behavioral change. I think our approach to HIV and AIDS in our society, we are predominantly conservative, we are predominantly Christian, we are predominantly Amadlozi and so forth.
Yes.
Conversations about HIV and AIDS, if you go to rural Cholocho right now, they are attached to issues to do with immorality. Yes, HIV professionals and so forth, those who test, go there and tell them that no, it's not about immorality and so forth. But if you go to the actual communities, you'll find that the groups that are identified to be having HIV and AIDS are deemed to be society.
So there is still discrimination.
There is stigma and discrimination, which is something contributing towards the spread of HIV and AIDS. People don't even want to go get tested. In the case that they go get tested, they don't encourage others to do so and so forth. So I think we have to deal with issues to do with stigma by stimulating conversations, not only in hotels, Holiday Inn and Rainbow, where big guys come and discuss and so forth, but stimulate debates in the last parts of Binga and so forth. Have these kinds of conversations in Binga, have these kinds of conversations in Cholocho and so forth, such that everyone knows that we are going to Vision 2030.
Okay. Yeah,
Before I
most
close,
people, they don't know.
yes, before I close, if you are to go right now, pick an average person there by hyper and talk to them about what we are discussing here. Chances are they might not even know, yet it's an issue that affects them, and it's an issue whose success depends on their behavior. So I think we have to do a lot, but I don't disagree that it's possible, but I think with the rate in which we are approaching this issue, it's not possible.
Okay. Before I come back to you guys with questions, Mr. Kani, you've heard what they have to say. From your own expert point of view, what do you have to say?
Good, thank you. I think what we are talking about is risk reduction, not prevention. And the policies and what is being done are commendable, but they're not going to end AIDS. Because the human factor, we've talked about some of them, the use of condoms, people don't always use, etc., etc. But a sentence I remember from when I was active in this, in confronting HIV and AIDS, we must not forget it's 100% preventable. We know what causes it, and we know how it's prevented. And we've talked a little bit, it's mainly caused through sexual intercourse. Good point that mother-to-child transmission is not really a problem any longer. certainly was. And HIV/AIDS is also spread through infected blood. But that also, if we're careful, is not a big issue. So the issue is sexual transmission. Just imagine what would happen if everybody lived by God's plan for marriage, family, and relationships, which is basically no sex before marriage, no sex outside marriage. AIDS would disappear. So it is possible, in theory, to stop it by 2030. I think the human and social factors mean actually that's not likely to happen, but we need to keep pushing for that. And we mentioned the religious authorities. I think religious people, especially Christians, the church, have portrayed a negative view of sex. If you ask the hyper person, what does the church say about sex? Probably the answer is no sex before marriage. And we haven't said the yes that God actually made sex very good. So one of the things we used to say, sex is excellent. Sex is enjoyable. But sex is also exclusive in the plan of God. So it's possible to avoid AIDS by saying no, but I think we need to communicate, actually we're saying yes. We're saying yes to healthy relationships before marriage. We're saying yes to a happy marriage, one man, one wife, and that for life. And we're saying yes to a good environment for our children to grow up in, a healthy family. So yes, HIV/AIDS is preventable. I don't think we're tackling it. If I just say, if we look on sex as a good gift from God, it's important that you use a good gift right. And one example of that, my cell phone was actually a gift from my daughter, and I'm very grateful to her. But suppose I got the cell phone and I say, oh, thank you very much. You know, there's this nail in the wall, I've been wanting to bang it in. Boom, boom, boom. That is horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, that's.
We're using a good gift in the wrong way. I believe that's what we're doing with the sex gift that God has given us. Maybe that's enough.
Thank you. So before I come back with questions, do you have more points to support your side? Okay. So, recently we have had the Mashurubi, if you know them. Okay, these are guys, these are miners, gold pan miners. Gold panners, yes. And right now they are trending. They're trending because of the use of the killing people is, but there's also an issue of them forcing sex workers to have unprotected sex with them. And if we are to end HIV and AIDS by year 2030, what do you think must be done in such areas like mines and all those places that sex workers and these people with money are usually gathered for a while doing business?
Okay, just maybe to go back a little bit. I do acknowledge that for us to end AIDS by the year 2030 is going to be challenging.
Yes.
But nevertheless, I do believe that with looking at how things have been transpiring in the past years, we look at the technological developments that we've seen. For considering that now we're in 2020, I do believe that there's a substantial chance that experts in the medical field can come up with drugs that can eradicate HIV and AIDS. We've seen in past years, from the 90s, that Zimbabwe, before ARVs were introduced, that by that time the prevalence of HIV and AIDS was quite high. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in 1999, 29% of the population were infected. But as we speak today, 20 years after, I think it has gone down to 13%, less than 13%. So I do believe that although it is challenging, there's also a chance that by 2030, maybe, and also do not forget that there's been 2 people so far in the world medically who have been cured of HIV and AIDS through stem transplants and all those complicated processes. But if you go down the history books, you realize that there have been 2 people who have been cured of this condition.
Why then is it that we haven't implemented that? We're still complaining about the disease even up to date.
Okay, well, that's a tough question. That's
Okay.
a tough question.
Would you want to help? Okay, maybe Mr. Cunningham. He's saying there are 2 people that have been cured. I think there are more though, because there was this other doctor. He was American, was black. He cured some HIV patients. He won the court. He went to court and he won the case, but unfortunately, it's late now. But why is it that we haven't implemented those methods that he used?
How much do those methods cost?
Or it's because of cost.
I don't know, but I imagine it's a very expensive procedure.
Yes, it is a very expensive procedure, but also we should note that this Vision 2030 is a world vision, which Zimbabwe has adopted, like what you said. Yes, what you said.
I think I'm not an expert in
Yes.
the medical field, but rather from the little that I have heard, I understand that the cure to HIV and AIDS is tricky in that what might cure HIV and AIDS in one person might not be the same with the next person, largely on the basis of how they respond to treatment, their cells, and how they evolve on a daily basis. So that could have been another challenge. But back to the issue that we are talking about, which is the cure to HIV and AIDS that we are talking about, the Vision 2030, to say no to new infections. The infections that are there, we expect them to be contained and suppressed, viral load and so forth. I think that is the only option that we can implement at this level. And as he rightfully places statistics to say, by 1999 we had more than how many percent? 29%, and now we're at less than 13%. If you look at that and analyze our theory of change, which has been advocacy against errant behavior, advocacy for the use of condoms, advocacy for ABCD, abstinence, be faithful, condomize, and so forth, you can see that we are registering significant achievements rather. So if we continue in this direction, yes, by 2030 we might be on less than 4%, we might be somewhere there. But there is another option, which is to say, why not invest heavily in this vision? Instead of having it gradual, we can fast track it and invest heavily. Make sure that everyone everywhere knows about a condom. Every woman out there knows that they don't need to rely on a male so that they have safe sex. They can use their own condoms. They know how to use them. Make it a point that each and every person who is infected with HIV and AIDS does not feel like they have to spread it, is patriotic enough to know that there is Vision 2030 and I am a little person to be to challenge it and make it impossible. So I think we have to invest on this cue, not that one of saying someone was killed. And I'm not an expert in the medical field, but if there is such a drug, we welcome it.
Okay, coming back to the question, you haven't answered the question though. I was talking about Shurugi guys who are actually trending, and these places that we see a lot of sex workers and a lot of guys with money to engage in sex with them. The problem is the males, they are refusing to have safe sex. So there's been an outbreak of STIs in that area.
Okay, the problem that is there, it's actually the males who don't want to use protection during sexual whatsoever cases. But the bigger problem is, how did those people end up in that state of mind? Why do they think like that? Where was everyone to the point that these people radicalized to the extent that they don't feel like they have to protect themselves from HIV and AIDS? Nonetheless, they can even force others to conduct themselves in such a manner. We are talking about Mashurukus. Those are radical constituencies. And in any case, if you want to confront them, don't go to them when they are carrying pangas about to rape a woman. We have to do community-based intervention. Those are brothers to people. Those are fathers. Those are sons to other people. And if we are to intervene, instead of sending troops and sending so and so, we need to go to communities. They come from communities. We need to tell people how to behave around them. We need to study the psychology that propels them to conduct themselves in such a manner. So I think we have to identify other problems. Like I have stated, that the problem of HIV and AIDS is not something that stands alone. It is affected by other issues. For example, we have the problem of brainwashing. The issue of Mashuruku is just brainwashing. It's not unique to Zimbabwe. Go to Nigeria, the northern part of Nigeria, youths that side are becoming militias. They are radicalized. They are brainwashed into believing that they have to use force in whatever they get and be lawless. Go to other countries like South Sudan, you will get clashes between farmers and livestock keepers, deadly clashes. In Zimbabwe, go to mining towns, you will see deadly clashes. Why? Because those people have been distant from civil thinking. They don't perceive themselves, they don't experience themselves as citizens, as normal people. So in any case, intervention for AIDS is welcome. To say, yes, we have to rehabilitate these people back into being normal beings or functional members of society, but it can't come at the level of HIV and AIDS. You can't go to someone who is militant for another reason and say, stop being militant because there is HIV and AIDS, yet they were never militant because there is HIV and AIDS. You need to identify the root cause of why they are militant. Then you can get why it is being discharged at the level of spreading HIV and AIDS. So I think community-based intervention should put its focus. Those, for example, the people who are mandated to go and arrest those guys, the NGOs that are working towards behavioral change, they should have in their package someone who talks about HIV and AIDS and the importance of rehabilitation against HIV and AIDS and its spread and so forth. So I think those are the issues that we need to tackle. And those radical constituencies that we talk about, for example, commercial sex workers, I know some people from liberal backgrounds will say, if you are a commercial sex worker, it's okay, you can do what you like. But there is a reason why legislation does not allow such things to happen. It's not an issue of morality at the level of policy. At times, it's an issue of enforcement. You can tell that the moment we legalize commercial sex work as a government, it has been legalized. Do we have measures to make sure that the people who are going to be practicing this are safe? The policy cracks that we then hear of are them being raped in minefields. It's because we were never ready to have such policies. So I think at the level of...
we've tried, we've had workshops with them, education, they actually get certificates.
Yes, policy makers, if we are talking about a policy is not made by one constituency to say, because you want to make legislation about commercial sex work, if we attend to commercial sex workers, therefore we have made a policy about commercial sex work. You need to deal with issues how the rest of the community perceives them. Stigmatization of commercial sex workers. How those people from, the thugs and so forth. Because in our case, in our community, a commercial sex worker is perceived to be someone of loose morals.
Exactly.
And the moment we identify you as a societal misfit, we think you deserve everything that happens to you.
Exactly.
That is why Makorokozas feel comfortable by raping a commercial sex workers, yet they can't do the same to someone who is normal, or
Yes.
not someone who is normal, for someone who is not a commercial sex worker. So I think we have to invest a lot in teaching communities. And I think, yes, it's okay we legalized commercial sex work, but were we ready for that? And it should be an indicator to those who are handling such cases to say, yes, you have advocated for the legalization of commercial sex work. But the clear indicators in policy evaluation, there are indicators. Indicators are pointing out that we were never ready for this policy. Go to Barrow Street. Commercial sex workers are victimized by people who are not Mashurupis. Go to the Mashurupis. Commercial sex workers are being killed. The issue of rape is minute. They are being killed. So were we ready to legalize such a thing? Not at the level of moralism, but at the level of policy and enforcing and making sure that the policy is functional and can go ahead. I think
that's
would
a
be my
debate for another day. But question number 2, since this vision is a world vision, to what extent can these programs be integrated, or this vision be integrated in a resource-constrained country like Zimbabwe? Okay, to what extent can this vision be integrated into a resource-constrained country like Zimbabwe?
I think that in a country like Zimbabwe, we can take measures such as campaigns. You're talking about being resource constrained. I indicated earlier that Zimbabwe is the fight against HIV and AIDS. We've had quite a number of arms to join in and help us fight HIV and AIDS. We're not only looking at what the government has been doing, but we look at what other countries have been doing. Western countries, Zimbabwe has been getting funding to make sure that AIDS is eradicated. The fight against AIDS. We also look at there have been campaigns that have been done to make sure that people are educated on AIDS. So it's not only about the funding that the government has been investing money, or companies from the public and private sector have been putting in money to fight HIV and AIDS, but also the campaigns, the awareness, those things, I think they go a long way to make sure that AIDS is eradicated.
Okay, over to you. To what extent do you think this vision can be integrated in a resource-constrained country like Zimbabwe?
I think to a lesser extent.
Okay, explain.
To a lesser extent, because if we are to perceive this issue of the issue of HIV and AIDS at the level of procuring drugs and awareness and so forth, not realizing that some behavioral issues are sustained by resource issues. For example, the behavior of lessers and lessees in tertiary institutions is sustained by the fact that your parent might not be in a position to give you 3 meals a day.
Yes.
And you might end up looking for someone who will give you another meal. So I think, yes, we can integrate it, but in our integration, we need to integrate each and every facet of our community to other international programs. Development. If we are going to talk about the fight against HIV and AIDS, let us talk about the fight for development. It is not a coincidence that the prevalence of HIV and AIDS is higher in underdeveloped countries than it is in developed countries. So there is a visible link between the absence of resources and the fight against HIV and AIDS. So let us have the debate on development with the debate on the fight against HIV and AIDS. If we are talking about integrating the agenda to fight HIV and AIDS, let us ask the international community, what do you have for us in terms of development? So those who want to fight HIV and AIDS by year 2030 should be in a position to say the cause of HIV and AIDS, or there is a relationship between the spread of HIV and AIDS and underdevelopment, which is something visible to everyone. You don't need rocket science to prove that.
Okay. And also, you are supporting the side that yes, by 2030 we can end HIV and AIDS. But there's been an issue that yes, Zimbabwe we now manufacture ARVs, but also up to now we still have people going to clinics and being told that there are no ARVs. So how are we going to achieve that when we still have a problem like that?
Okay. I maybe this is needless for me to say, but I although I'm not, I acknowledge that I'm not part of the people. There's no stigma in this, but I've heard stories just like what you hinted, that the people, they go to clinics and they don't find the medication that they need. I do admit that that's been happening, although I'm not a first-hand witness to that. But although such things have been happening, I'm quite aware that maybe that was just a temporary problem where people could not get the medication that they needed or the right medication for them. But also we have to look at the positive side that these drugs, they've been made available for all the people. Considering the gravity of this condition, that it kills people. It has taken so many lives. You realize that people have been getting these drugs have been made available to people for free, which is unlike for any other illness. You look at things like cancer and diabetes, all these conditions, people have to pay for those procedures. But with AIDS, those things have been made available for free. So that might have been a temporary measure. That might have been a temporary situation where those drugs weren't available. But I do believe that those drugs can be found.
Okay. Do you have anything to say concerning that question?
I think concerning that question, the mistake that we make is assuming that ARVs and drugs for HIV and AIDS are for free.
Are they not?
They are not for free. They are procured at state level, they are procured at government level, and so forth. But here is the myth about Africa or Zimbabwe in general. If you check, if you have a payslip, there is what is called the AIDS levy. It is that AIDS levy that goes to finance the procurement of HIV and AIDS drugs.
Okay.
And that is the money that is used. And it is very risky for any rational human being or anyone in government or in opposition to rely on aid for such critical drugs, because when they are coming as aid, it's taxpayers' money from affluent communities in the first world and so forth. Now, here is the problem that we have, and I will tie it down to development again.
Okay.
You go to countries like Burundi. In Burundi, 20% of the population contributes 80% to the country's revenue collection. 80% only contributes 20%. What that effectively means is that when we are talking about, for example, the AIDS levy, only 20% is employed and is paying the AIDS levy, and they are the only ones who are financing those drugs. Imagine the risk and the burden that they have to carry to actually bring drugs to wherever they are. In Zimbabwe, unemployment is above 90-something%. And you get the fact in front of us is that we are at risk. If donor funding does not come, it means we might be in a huge crisis. So everyone who is talking about the fight against HIV and AIDS, by 2030, do we have sustainable mechanisms of fighting HIV and AIDS? No, we don't. If we have a 90-something plus unemployment rate, if donor communities wake up tomorrow, Donald Trump having bombed Iran, and everyone says we are on our own. Where are we going to procure those drugs from? Do we have the capacity to do that? And these are the threats that we have to talk about, not issues to say when you go to the hospital there are no drugs and so forth, they have expired in Zimbabwe, we have to manufacture. You don't have to manufacture so that you have drugs. You don't need to own an aeroplane so that you can fly. You can just pay for it and use it. You don't need to manufacture HIV and AIDS drugs so that your people can be treated. You just have to have strategic resource mobilization towards HIV and AIDS. So I think in Zimbabwe, we are making great strides with regards to our tax regime. There is now the 2%. If I was in a position of authority, I would say government should come up with a clear structure to say whether you are in the formal or you are in the informal sector, you should be taxed specifically for HIV and AIDS, such that we have sustainable mechanisms of fighting HIV and AIDS, sustainable mechanisms of bringing drugs to Zimbabwe, sustainable mechanisms of financing such conversations to say they should also happen in Binga, they should also happen in Cholocho, not at the benevolence of a donor in Europe or in America or somewhere in the world. So I think those are the issues that we need to speak to.
Okay, what would you say have been the effect of technology towards achieving this 2030 vision? For example, the self-testing kits.
I think that technology has had a great impact in minimizing rather the transmission of HIV and AIDS, or the contraction of HIV and AIDS. You look at now, like you talked about the lawless Mashurubi and all these people going around raping people and all. Some of this has a link with the question that you just asked me about technology, that we now have drugs that someone can take maybe after having sexual intercourse with someone who has the disease. I think this is within 48 hours that someone can go and get a drug. I'm not sure if it's if it's called an ARV or what, but someone can go and get a drug. They can get tested. They can also get a drug that prevents them from contracting the disease, even after having sexual intercourse with someone who has the disease. So I think this has also played a great role in minimizing contractions.
Okay. What should you say about our technology? Is it helping?
I think to a greater extent, technology is helping.
Okay.
Technology is helping because, for example, self-testing. I know a lot of things might not be said in public, but in some communities where it's highly scientific and preferences are used to determine what people want, you can discover that someone was not being tested largely because they are afraid of needles. You get the idea. Someone was not being tested because of the process and so forth, because of having to see someone interpreting their results for them and so forth. And I think the gift that technology is giving to us with regards to technology, to say, no, you can go and test yourself alone in your own bedroom and you discover results and you see what you can do. I think that is something that is a great achievement. And the effect at a cultural or at a social level is that the responsibility to fight HIV and AIDS is being devolved or decentralized to the individual. If you talk about self-testing kit, self-testing, you underline the word self-testing. If as a community we encourage the culture of self-testing, it means that everyone, everywhere, is fighting HIV and AIDS at an individual level. So I think self-testing technology is good, technology is this, but technology needs to be supported. For example, when we talk about self-testing kits and so forth, we need to interpret them in such a way that people find value in them. and in such a way that people can use them and utilize them. So yes, technology has been a blessing, but we need to invest in conversation, stimulate discussions, and stimulate discourses and create a culture to sustain the technology that is there.
Okay. But don't you think if I find out that I'm HIV positive alone, chances are low that I will go to a clinic to actually disclose that I'm HIV positive. May you please have some pills?
Yes, I think that is now an issue, a behavioral issue. That is why I'm saying technology alone is not enough. Technology needs to be complemented by some effort to shape views, to shape behavior, and so forth. Those who are promoting self-testing machines should be in a position to be engaging academics, should be in a position to be engaging social scientists, and so forth, to determine or to shape the environment in a way that if you go for self-testing, you will have a manual of what to do. It will be inherent within you. Because the danger now in unrolling a policy without telling people how to use it, people might commit suicide after testing and discovering that they are HIV positive.
Yes.
So we need to invest not only in the phone or in the mechanism alone, we need to invest on the psyche of the individuals that are using the technology, because you can't empower people with cell phones and not tell them how to use them. So I think that is the level that we need to engage, to say there is self-testing, let us invest in the knowledge about it, create knowledge, the politics of creating knowledge at that level, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Kandra. You have heard the questions. From your own expert point of view, what do you have to say?
Good. I think we're talking good sense,
Okay.
and I like technology is helping in all of that. If we're serious about ending HIV, I think we need to be more radical about behavior change, because the assumption that we're talking about is everybody's going to have sex all the time. Probably all the time is an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
And actually, there's no reason why I should be HIV positive, and each individual can actually make that decision. But the sort of cultural consensus in the world is you can't tell anybody they shouldn't be having sex. And I think we've actually got to recognize that and try and help people say, yes, you can be a full person without having sex. You don't have to have sex by the time you're 18 or 28 or whatever it is. So I'm suggesting that seriously, to end HIV, we need more emphasis on radical behavior change.
Okay. You have heard what our panel has to say. You are now free to ask questions, add and subtract. Over to you.
You should be virgins before they get married.
Okay.
There are some churches which are really encouraging. They have parties, the old women test the girls and find that they are virgins and they celebrate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that can help us.
So
to-
that helps the spread of HIV.
Oh, stop. Just stop.
It will stop, yeah. So
Okay.
behavioral change is the in thing.
Okay.
Actually strays a lot how we should, as the wife and husband, how we should tackle that problem.
Anyone else?
For that, I'm a student.
Yes.
Students, as you talking, they are afraid of pregnancy, not HIV.
Very true.
So it's a problem. So there's a gap on youth. Because these youth, they need to be educated, because they are not afraid of HIV, they are afraid of
Becoming
pregnancy.
pregnant, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Okay, I think Vision 2030 is a reality to some
Okay.
extent, or to a greater extent. Okay, mathematically speaking, in a period of about 15 years, the drop in new infection has dropped by 16%, like from 29% to 18 to about 18%. So, if
So that we bring AIDS to an end by year 2030, I think that like all the other gentlemen and the guys on the panel hinted on, that behavioral change, I think that we can increase awareness. We can also increase campaigns and make drugs, medication more readily available. I think those are some of the few things. I cannot exhaust all the measures that can be taken, but I think those are some of the few things that is gotten us to where we are today, and those are also some of the things that can propel us further to make sure that we, by 2030, by year 2030, HIV and AIDS might be eradicated.
Okay. So you're saying now it's not possible, but what must we do?
I think we should come up with more sustainable and systematic ways of fighting HIV and AIDS.
Okay.
The first one being coming up with locally based mechanisms of financing facilities that fight against HIV and AIDS, financing the drugs procurement,